Good afternoon. This is Sherri Kimes. I'm a visiting professor at the NUS Business School in Analytics and Operations, and I'm also a emeritus professor at Cornell University at the Hotel School. And what we're going to be talking about today is in the hospitality industry, what should hotels do? What should other hospitality companies do during this unprecedented situation of COVID-19? And so, with this and some of this, I've done some research on this maybe about 10 years ago and also more recently in the last month or so. And to say this is global is an understatement. I just completed a survey with over 900 respondents from around the world, and I think there are 89 different countries represented, which is pretty astonishing and kind of a representative of what's going on here. But the question is, what do you do? I mean, how do you get through this? This is completely unprecedented. Let me just kind of go through some things from the research. But number one, and this actually comes from my research as well, rule number one is don't panic. You may feel like you want to panic, but as one of my friends who's been in the hotel industry for a long time said, if you need to panic, go in the corner, get your panic attack over with, and then calm yourself down and come back, because you need to think clearly to be able to come up with a good strategic approach for working through a challenging situation like this. And so basically there's kind of two strategies. One is more external, so more customer focused, and the other is more internal, so more operations and finance kind of focused. So let's talk about the external ones first. And with this, we're talking about things like maintaining connections, community service, and then thinking about your customers, because your customers are just like us. I mean, they're nervous, they're worried, and what are their pain points? And what are things that you can do to try to help address those sorts of pain points? And so maintaining connections. And so, so why does that matter? Well, it matters a lot in a situation like this. And let me show you a study that was done on this after the financial crisis in 2009 and 2010. And this was done by one of my colleagues at Cornell, Checky Dev. And they were looking at hotels that were winners, so hotels that outperformed their competition, and those who were losers, those who underperformed their competition. And they wanted to see if there was any difference, and they looked at their balance sheets. They wanted to see if there was any difference in how they were spending. So they looked at operating expenses and marketing and sales, and they looked at the performance and profitability measures. And what they found was really very interesting. Everybody cut costs, and so everybody cut their marketing expenses, but the winners cut it by a lot less than the losers. But to me, the particularly fascinating thing was that the winners, the hotels that were outperforming their competition, actually increased their spending on other marketing activities. So this was things like training and travel and local promotion. So basically relationship building as opposed to the more traditional type of marketing. Something to think about as you go through this. And in the study I just completed, a lot of people talked about the community service sorts of things they're doing, which we'll get to in a moment, and other things that they're doing just to kind of try to keep in contact with their clients and their guests. And then community service. It's a perfect time for this. I mean, people needs things. So whether it's donating food, whether you can see here an example with Hilton and American Express offering 1 million rooms to healthcare workers. They've got the rooms. I mean, why not? And the healthcare workers have the need. Or you can see with the American Hotel and Lodging Association, Hospitality for Hope. So, I mean, community service, it's a good time to be building that kind of brand awareness, or just even company awareness, that you're a good citizen. Plus, it's also something good for your staff to be doing. Or you can see here in Singapore with the quarantine hotels. I mean, this was a win-win-win. Whoever came up with this idea is brilliant, because from a public health perspective, we needed it. It was also good for the families of the people who were put into quarantine in a hotel like this. And then it's also good for the hotels because there's nobody in them. And this has been pretty popular here in Singapore and also Hong Kong and in some other cities. But it's a creative way to be offering that kind of community service. And then look at your customer pain points. I mean, they're worried. I mean, when are they going to travel again? Is it going to be safe? Do I want to subject my family to an unsafe situation? I mean, should I make a reservation? I mean, think about all of this. And so you think, for example, with healthcare workers, they're working hard all day, and then when they finish work, going home, what if they infect their family? They don't want to do that. And so you can see this is one from Marriott, but a lot of companies are doing this with offering special rates for caregivers. Or you can see up in Bangkok, there's a hotel that connected with the hospital offering a 14-day long stay experience. Again, you're something kind of, okay, what are some things, what are some of the pain points? And in the study I just completed, people talked about things such as, looking at things like, people like staycations, of course, but also kind of office away from home for those who are allowed, who are not under a circuit breaker like us. But there's a lot of things that you can do looking at those customer pain points. And another customer pain point is prepaid vouchers. And basically what I'm talking about here, refund policies. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news about airlines and hotels that are just being really tight with this. This is not the time to be difficult about or inflexible with the refund. And so with this, I mean, particularly in Europe, Africa, and Middle East, a lot of hotels are offering prepaid vouchers at a discount. And so people can use them at some time in the future. It's good for the customer because it addresses their pain point, but also helps the hotel with cash flow. So kind of a win-win situation. And then you're kind of, again, hotels offering refunds for cancellations. Yes, you could say, no, I'm not going to offer a refund, but I mean, that's good for the short term. It's not good for the long term. And then with all-purpose strategies, with this one, I mean, looking at, kind of more the internal sorts of strategies. And so this is more operations and financial. And so with this, I'm looking at things like renovations and maintenance and training and cost cutting, creative use of the employees, and then also government support if it's available. And so with renovations and maintenance, if it's allowed, this is a perfect time to be doing those delayed renovations and maintenance. If there's nobody in the hotel or very few people, why not? Again, if it's allowed, because in Singapore, under the circuit breaker, from what I understand, the renovations are not allowed, but in some countries they are. And so, I mean, and it's also, think about the recovery. When things start to improve, it helps you be in a better position. And then also training. Now, what was really interesting in the study that I just did was that there's a real different policy towards cutting costs with employees between in different parts of the world. And so in the Americas, they were more likely to have laid people off. In the Asia Pacific, they were more likely to have reduced salaries to keep the employees. A big emphasis on training. What can we do? And the training, of course, is going to be remote, kind of like this, right? But what can we do to give our employees the necessary skills to move forward? Usually, we don't have time for that. We got the time right now, and get your employees ready with the skills they need to be successful when you start going through recovery. And then cost cutting, yes, of course, you're going to have to cut costs. But when you do this, and this is from a study I did 10 years or so ago, make sure that when you cut costs, that you're not cutting costs in areas that are going to be affecting the customer. And so, for example, one friend I had who was with a chain that had luxury properties, he talked about the negative impact. When they cut, we're not going to have fresh flowers anymore. Okay, yeah, they cost, but he said it had an impact on their satisfaction ratings and repeat business for about 3 years afterwards. So think about that. So if you've got to cut things, be cutting things that are maybe not going to be affecting the employees. Closing floors, maybe closing some facilities, or reducing hours, but try to maintain that customer experience. And then creative use of employees. With this one, looking at, you've got the employees, they have a hospitality mindset, they like to help people. Some great examples of this. So like what Singapore Airlines has been doing with redeploying their flight attendants to help out in healthcare. On Australia, Qantas has helped place some of their employees with Woolworths, which had a very strong need. Or in the US, you can see with Marriott and CBS had quite a need, and they brought in some of the Marriott employees. Again, they had that mindset of customer service. And so the pay might not be as good, but you are taking care of your employees. And then if government subsidies are available, apply for them. I mean, this is not true in all parts of the world where these are available, but governments in many parts of the world are trying to give some kind of support to hotels to help them get through this unprecedented situation. And so again, the internal strategies, so the renovations and maintenance and creative use of employees and so forth. But let's kind of talk about the next stage, which is we can't just be thinking, we've got to get through this, but at the same time, we've got to be thinking about what's going to happen in the long term. And so with this, we're talking about contingency planning and recovery plans. And the shocking thing in the study that I've just been analyzing the data like yesterday, is that only 35% of the respondents actually had a contingency plan. That just floors me, 35%. It was a higher percentage in Asia Pacific, it was 44%, but this is something that you really need to have, because you think about this, ITB in Berlin, what if that's canceled? Well, it was canceled. Or what about the Olympics? What if they're canceled? They were canceled. Or one of my colleagues in Dubai was telling me about talking with some of his hotels in Saudi back in February. What if Hajj is canceled? Oh, that'll never happen. Yeah, it was. And so what do you do? Obviously, you couldn't predict this, but I mean, having those what if sorts of things, at the very least, have a plan for what if something bad happens, so that you have something that you could use for the future. And then be keeping a logbook. This is something that my friends and colleagues who went through SARS have told me, that they said that the SARS experience was so helpful for them for getting through this, because they said they could see the same conversations that they were having now with exactly the same as what they had 17 years ago. So keep some notes so that you remember the sorts of things that you're doing. And then also at the same time, be thinking about the recovery. I mean, what's it going to be later this year, next year, the year after? When are people going to start traveling? What are guests going to want? What's the hotel going to look like? You need to be thinking about that now, because if you're not ready for that, you're not going to be prepared. And so be thinking about it. And does anybody have an answer to that yet? Not really. But I mean, but this is where you get your strategic thinker hat on to be kind of going through this. And so kind of, again, rule number one, remember, is don't panic. You will get through this, and you don't want to panic because you want to be thinking clearly. Everything will be okay as long as you think clearly and have a plan on how you're going to approach it. So thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. I see some coming in here. Okay, let's see here. How much does lean management help in people-oriented businesses? Oh, that's a very interesting question. You're asking an operations management person. A lot, because it doesn't necessarily, the lean doesn't have to be in areas that are going to be negatively affecting customers. One of the courses I teach is basically a design thinking class. And we talk about what are the customer pain points and how can we deliver those in an efficient manner, but also in an area that adds customer satisfaction. Once the restrictions are lifted, do you have any tips on how hotels should ease back into business as usual mode? I would say very slowly. In the study that I just did, again, I'm just writing it up. I was writing it up yesterday, so this is kind of fresh off the press, and I still need to go back to it. People talked about the need to be real positive but realistic, and to avoid negativity. Are things going to go back to the way they were before? No, they're not. And so I would take it very, very slowly. And I would also be spending your time now focusing on building your relationships with others, because those will help you in the future. People aren't going to be ready right away. Do you think that hotels that volunteer their space for quarantine hotels will have to overcome negative stigma once they reopen? I don't really think so. And there have been some studies done on this. I mean, there was one. Okay, I'll give you one that maybe they would. Apparently, the hotel in Hong Kong that had the first outbreak of SARS, they had to rebrand. But I think, when you look at the quarantine hotels here in Singapore and in Hong Kong, it's all very, very controlled. in terms of the health and everything like that. And it's also, I think it's considered to be good community service and good public service. So, I mean, as long as everything is, you maintain, you talk about how we kept everything clean, how everything has been sanitized, and also emphasize how we helped out the community during a very rough time. What about the smaller players in the industry? Oh, that's a hard one because, I mean, you're the thing for the larger play. Well, there's actually good and bad things. The hard things are that they might not have the same financial reserves to be able to get through something like this. The positive part is they're able to be more nimble, looking at what's going on with the market, how are customers going to change, and being able to make those sorts of changes really quickly, as opposed to a large chain. I mean, overcoming the inertia to make a major change is, I mean, those of you who are with large chains or large companies know what I'm talking about. It takes a long time. So there's some advantages to being small. How should we react when competitors begin to slash prices after the end of lockdown? Don't follow them. I mean, again, the research I've done on this from 10 years ago and also now, people talk about their biggest regret was cutting rates. Right now, lower rate is not going to bring more people in. It starts a price war. And if you do, and your hoteliers in the audience, I mean, you know that there's a difference between your public rate and your private rate. So your public rate is what everybody can see. The private rate is what you might have as special rates for particular market segments that are tightly fenced. And so you're probably going to have some discounts for those, but they're not available to everybody. And so be very careful with how you fence things. And again, I'm basing this on the research I've done where people said, they said, it took me 5 years to get my rate up that high. And it took me about 2 months to lose it, like actually a week to lose it. And so it will not, you're going to have to cut probably, but make sure that you fence it very tightly. Okay, let's see. Should the hospitality industry use this time to upskill, reskill their employees? Yeah, it's perfect. Again, in the study that I just did, people talked about the training that they were providing, and also kind of understanding, realizing that there's virtual training, right? Because before, a lot of our training, especially for smaller hotels, everything was in person, and it doesn't. Now we're realizing, it doesn't have to be in person. And so it's something where we could take our valuable employees and then be able to help them with the skills that they're going to be needing to be able to improve themselves, and then also be in a position to help the hotel in the future. So I think it's an absolutely perfect time to be doing that. Do companies need to bring down the prices of their goods? Well, let me give you a quote from an example from one of my friends who used to be the senior vice president. He was talking about their hotels in South America and during the Zika crisis. And they had one hotel that was just cutting their rates like crazy. And if people are, it's like, no, don't do that. I mean, if people are worried about their health or their safety of their family, a lower price is not going to make any difference whatsoever. And so that's the other, and a quote from a study I did about 10 years ago, but summarized it really well. Lower rates they don't bring in more customers, they bring in the wrong customers. Plus, the research that's been done on this by some of my colleagues at Cornell, they found that hotels that are priced below their competitive set, significantly below their competitive set, like 5% below, have a significantly lower RevPAR. And so their occupancy, they just really don't get that many more customers. How do you see the existing practices during the lockdown period being carried into regular practice? Well, I think a number of things. I mean, again, if I had all the exact answers to this, as one of my former colleagues said, I wouldn't be teaching school. But social distancing, we never even heard of that in January. I mean, I asked my students that a couple of weeks ago. I said, did you guys ever hear this before? They said, nope. It was the operative term. I think the social distancing. And then also you start thinking about with that, okay, check-in, is check-in going to be the same? Will people want to stand in the lobby? What about room service? I mean, you could just kind of keep going with this. And then the hygiene, the sanitation and everything like that, I think is going to be something that continues for a while. Because again, think of your customers going to, or even just think of yourself, going to somewhere, like getting on an airplane. Is it going to be safe? What if somebody by me is coughing? What about if that person's too close to me? Everybody's going to be kind of freaked out for a couple of weeks, and a couple of weeks, a couple of years. And so I think a lot of this is going to carry over. It has huge implications for restaurants. I mean, social distancing, and also just for hotel food and beverage or spa. I don't know. Massage. I don't know. How would you recommend maintaining social connections given social distancing? Kind of like we are right now. So you're reaching out to people through with an email, or you're doing it through Facebook, or you're talking to them over Zoom or Skype or something like that. You're maintaining that relationship. One of the things that people also talked about in the open-ended comments on the survey I just did was that you're making it real. I mean, not being overly positive, but and not rah, 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 everything's going to be exactly the same. It's not going to be the same. But, kind of, maintaining that relationship. Hi, how you doing? How's the family? What's going on with your company? Or highlighting things that you're doing to help the community. That sort of thing. So kind of the informal sorts of communication that you actually might be having with your friends. Probably not at the same level, but just kind of an informal, kind of staying top of mind. Or I've heard other examples of your hotels, like, for example, the funniest one I saw was hotels always have all sorts of amenities, right? We got all of our little shampoos and everything like that. And you're boxing those up nicely and a few other things and sending them to people. I mean, there's a variety of different sorts of things you can do. Do you think companies will need to band together and have a different collaboration model in the short term? Probably. Now, again, we get into legal issues here on countries, but I think this is a place for the hotel associations in different countries and cities to be going through and talking and going through, and also tourism, like in Singapore Tourism Board. I mean, they've been doing a lot to kind of help hotels and restaurants get through this. Do you anticipate, you think players will be able to focus on the bigger agenda of getting ahead in the competition, apart from focusing on survival in the post-COVID era? Okay, this is one where a strategic thinking approach is going to be, they're going to be doing kind of, you've got to be doing both. You have to survive, but you also need to be thinking ahead. Now, the other part with this too, those of you who've been through a disruption before, nobody's been through something like this before, but people who've been through SARS before, other disruptions, they know they have a plan. They're not panicking. And let me give you an example. Back 2009 or 2010, I was talking with an older alum from the hotel school, and he was probably in his late 70s. I said, "So what are you doing during the recession?" He said, "Well," again, remember he's like 78 years old. He said, "Well, I'm doing what I normally do. I'm buying restaurants. I could usually get a really good price." I said, "Not very good for the weak of stomach." Oh, okay. But I mean, you've got to do the things to get through. But then you also need to be thinking about what's this new reality going to be looking like, and how do I position myself? If you don't do that, you're not going to be ready. Will a mandatory health check questionnaire turn guests off? I don't think so. I mean, it depends how intrusive it is. I mean, you think of yourself. I mean, I can look at myself. I walked into a few hotels when they were still open, and they had all of the temperature screening, and they had all the masks, and people looking very healthcare-like. And I feel safe. And so there's something about I don't know the right term is the theater of safety, but there's something about making sure that people know that everything, the physical evidence, from a more academic standpoint, or intangible evidence showing them that everything is clean and safe. I think this is going to be something that's very important for people. You don't want it to be too intrusive, but it's something that, I think is going to make people feel a little bit more comfortable. Let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. I think I don't see anybody else have any questions here. I think I've gotten pretty much most of these here. Actually, I got a new one coming in. Well, No, I think I've got all, okay. Okay, do you anticipate, okay, this is interesting, a trend of properties having to convert from hotels to other uses if global tourism remains low for an extended period? Possibly. I mean, it depends. So like I was reading, just reading an article this morning about hotels in Hong Kong, and they've really had a rough time in Hong Kong. I mean, they had, they had all of the protests, and then they had this. And the government, from what I understand, hasn't been providing support too much for hotels. And nobody's going to Hong Kong. The things are pretty rough. And I was talking about some hotels are converting into offices or long-term stay and different sorts of things like that. So from a real estate perspective, I can definitely see something like that happening. What about accommodation listed on Airbnb and other similar platforms? Whoa, I was just reading a story yesterday, I think, about Airbnb, and they're now going to be requiring, I don't know whether it was a 3-day period or 36 hour, it was something with a three, about how to, I mean, that they were going to have a vacancy in there so that everything could be very, very clean and guaranteed on clean. And I think, this is me talking off the top of my head. I think it's going to be, for a while, I think it's going to be kind of negative effect because are people going to feel comfortable going into someone's house? Is it clean? Is it safe? Is my family going to be okay? And I don't know if I want to take any chances with that. So I can see why Airbnb would be doing something like that. But then for the people who are renting their places out that way, if they can't rent them as much as from a financial standpoint, maybe not quite as good. Okay, so I'd like to thank you very much for all of your time. And I want to remind you there's another session this coming Monday at 1 o'clock. And if you have any other questions or anything like that, please free to either contact me or to contact through Facebook, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.